everybody information about what the test scores actually mean. So when I prepared this, I really was preparing it with how do I help the community understand what the colors mean and what the numbers actually mean when we're talking about SPP, so school performance profile. So I didn't include everything I could have included in here. As a matter of fact, I had other data in here, but it gets very, very long. But what I hope you leave with is to have a good understanding of where we are academically by state standards, where we are with our APs, our SATs, and those academic pieces are very important, but I actually want to begin the program off by congratulating our tech ed department at the high school. That's why I asked Mr. Andrew Kites and Mr. Peitzman to stay. All right. So we've recently received a very impressive award at the high school, and it's TEEP. It's Technology Education and Engineering Association in the state. And I was fortunate to join our tech department, as did Ms. DeBona, waiting at the table to see if we were actually going to be the winners. But what it says is that our tech program at the high school is the best tech program in the state of Pennsylvania. So I want to congratulate them while they're here tonight. Fabulous, impressive, non-test score related. So that's what I wanted to start off with. I wanted to say, even though I'm going to give test scores tonight, Pennridge is such an incredible school district. There's so much to be proud of. And will there be areas that I'm going to talk about tonight to work on? There absolutely is. But in terms of what we've been able to do with the support of our school board is bring STEM education formally to 7th graders and 8th graders. And I encourage you, and I know several of you have asked if you can go into the classrooms and see what's happening, but at the middle level and at the high school level, in formal classes of STEM education is so impressive. Students and teachers and parents are just thrilled with what's going on in classrooms. Students are saying they don't want to leave those classrooms. So, and our music department, you know, we do offer education for the whole child here. So I did want to start out with saying how proud I am about a lot of the programs that are going on at Pennridge. We also earned a silver ranking, and I know we presented this before, but I thought it was appropriate to include it in the presentation. We're ranked 67 out of 686 schools in the state of Pennsylvania. So we really are in the top 10% in the state. We always are talking about improvement, but we are in good standings in the state of Pennsylvania, so I do want to applaud the high school for that as well. And I thought in the overall picture of what we're talking about, it's important to understand what the demographics are in the district, which is why I included these specific slides. So when we're talking about our percentage of special ed students, when we're talking about our percentage of economically disadvantaged students, where you're actually looking on the right-hand side there, and our ELL learners, you know, you're looking at a percentage of students who are included when I talk about the SPP scores. So that's why I included those. So you'll see that at the high school, we have a low percentage of ELL learners at the moment, but those numbers are increasing. They increased, you know, almost weekly here. We're at about 15% in the district for special ed, which is pretty much commensurate with the state. So our percent of special ed is 15, and so actually is the state of Pennsylvania. So I thought it was interesting and important to show you that. And this is just another slide showing you those statistics. And then we have the middle school. And what I highlighted middle school in red because we have 3 different middle schools, and you see that 2 of our middle schools, the populations demographically are similar, but then we have 1 middle school that's dissimilar. So if you can see that the economically disadvantaged at South is actually a lot higher, and so is the special education percentage. You see it's 23%, And the reason why that is because we have part-time learning support classes that are housed at South that are not housed at the other two. So the programs happen to be there. But it's important to understand that when we talk about academic performance as well. And then when we have our elementary facts, they're also different. And I think for the most part, what I really wanted to show was Guth. So Guth Elementary School, we have all of our ELL students, our English as a second language learners, all of our students are at that school. And different elementary schools have different special education programs there. So you'll see some disparity on percentage of special education students, and that's what that means. And then we have economically disadvantaged numbers highlighted because there are Title I schools. So we have a richly diverse population, and you'll see how different they are across different schools. Please stop me at any time if you want to ask any questions, but this is the reason why I put that there. So that as I explain what these scores mean, you have some understanding of what the demographics actually are. So what is an SPP? We hear SPP all the time, School Performance Profile, and it's based on many data points, and I'm going to show you what they are. There are state assessments, college readiness test, our NOCTI tests, our industry standards-based assessments. A big part of it is progress in closing the achievement gaps for underperforming students. And you'll see how our scores break down in there. That is an area that we really do need to focus on. And then the other really actually big piece is 40% of that score is what they call PBOS data, and it's really a growth score. So the next slide, I'm actually going to break it down to show you what each one means. But they also consider graduation rates, promotion, attendance rates, and then the offering of AP courses, the rigorous courses. And then they also have the extra points. So you can, the full score is 100 points, but you can earn additional points to that 100 by the number of students who score advanced on the assessment. So at the high school it would be the Keystones. So, and I actually used the high school performance profile to share with you because, you know, obviously we have one for every school, but I thought using that one would really show you, give you an understanding of why that score looks like it does. So at the elementary level, we are second in the county in terms of our SPP, our aggregate. So if you take all the schools, which is what that chart is showing you, in the county, we are second, in just below New Hope, Solebury. And last year we were third, so we're making progress. What we're doing at the elementary schools is exactly where we need to be, and I want to explain that. So the first thing you need to do to make sure that these test scores, that our students perform well on these tests, is that you have a standards-aligned curriculum. PA gives you those standards, and we need to align our curriculum to those standards. And over the years, the science standards have been put in place. Our science scores are always very good, so you have that curriculum in place. It's aligned and it's articulated. The teachers are all teaching that. They're using assessments to make sure that everybody's learning that, and they're using resources to help to support students who still need help, but that's such as Study Island. Last year, we had a proposal for all elementary schools for Everyday Math 4. Now, Everyday Math 4 is fully aligned to the standards. So we have that in place, and we saw the good growth in grass, and we're seeing the growth, even more growth I think that we expected. You know, sometimes there's an implementation dip with that first year with a new program, but we didn't really see that. So math, we're feeling very confident we're on the right track, and the scores show that. Our relative area of weakness in elementary is ELA. Now, we're aligned to the standards, but we really are working through our literacy leadership team to develop more rigorous instruction away from just one single resource that we use in Reading Street, not eliminate that, keep that, but really build a very rigorous framework for literacy. So you'll be hearing more about that at our next curriculum meeting, because writing has been a relative weakness in the district. So we're currently piloting a writing program at the elementary schools, and we'll be presenting that recommendation to use that particular program in all the elementary schools next year, because we're having such good results. So again, not only is the curriculum aligned and the curriculum is rigorous, we need to make sure that we're using assessments. Lincoln has been very beneficial to the district. So what you see at the elementary schools are very early adopters with the benchmark data. So now I have my curriculum, I'm teaching, I'm providing interventions and resources, but I need to be able to look at my data and make sure everybody's on track. What we've instituted are data discussions, data meetings at the elementary school. They are now happening as a matter of course. So that took, it took almost 2 years to get that actually going. Now it's a matter of what the practice that we do, but we see that. Now, do we have work to do? Yes, we do. I'm not presenting individual plans of progress or improvement from each of the elementary schools, but I want you to know that Dr. Price and I have met with some, and we still have a couple more this week, each building principal with the supporting special education and curriculum supervisors together, and we're analyzing all of this to say, where are we and where do we need to go? So you do not have individual school plans, and I do believe somebody asked me that, why aren't they there? And I have an overview of what the plans are globally. And then we come to the middle schools. So the middle schools, in general, in the state of Pennsylvania, do not do as well as elementary schools, and that's for sure. You can look, you can just see what these scores are. We were disappointed. I mean, anybody would be disappointed looking at those scores just across the county, and that is, they're higher than what the state averages are. But last year we were 5th in our county, and this year we're 8th, and we were very upset about that. There's a few different factors that go along in the middle school. So one thing everyone needs to understand is at the middle level, you could be, and we have students who take Algebra 1 Keystone, but they're tested on a PSSA 8. So they still have to take a test that they're not taking the course for. So that's one contributing factor. The other contributing factor, which affects all middle schools practically, is the fact that the state expected a 3 to 5 year time span to be able to take the standards, make sure all of our curriculum was aligned to the standards. I did actually talk to them. They hoped it was 3 years, but now they're saying they're not seeing it across the state at all, so they expect it more to be 5 years. So what did Pennridge do? So last year, Mike O'Boyle presented a program improvement proposal. We absolutely needed a standards-aligned curriculum for middle school. So middle school math, this year we have our 6th grade fully aligned curriculum. That's going very well. We have our 7th grade. Next year, 8th grade will be implemented, and Mr. O'Boyle will be here at our next curriculum meeting with a proposal for an Algebra 1 rewrite of the curriculum. So we have steps in place. We do expect that our 6th grade scores next year really should improve, even though this is year 1 of implementation. Yes, there may be a dip. However, it is a rigorous course and it's fully aligned. So I believe that we're on the right track now from the elementary level into the middle level for math. In terms of science, we're doing very well in science. We do very well here. We have that curriculum. It's been in place. You know, all the pieces that we need for science we have, and we're moving forward on that. ELA was very interesting looking at the data for middle schools. So what we saw across the board, PSSAs and the Lit Keystone alike, is that we are relatively weak on vocabulary and writing. It seems to be the pattern. So when you look at vocabulary, it's like, well, why are we so weak in vocabulary? And that is, you know, based on a number of factors, but it's also about the volume that you're reading. It's about what you're reading. It's about morphology and studying, word study, word attack, what do words mean? And all those things, that's what we're talking about. So at the next curriculum meeting, you'll hear about that for elementary. Hillary Japuki is working at the middle level on strategies for improvement there. So it's not that we don't have the full curriculum alignment, it's really more at this point we're looking at what resources do we need for teachers and how do we help the teachers become more strategic using the data that we have. So while I would say that elementary is really fully on board with data meetings, middle school, I'd say by next year, we'll have those full data meetings with full understanding of, what does the data mean? And as a classroom teacher, as a special ed teacher, as an IST teacher, as a gifted teacher, what does it mean and how do I get my students to the next level?
Can we ask some questions?
Yeah, sure. I go back.
Am I reading this right on, I'm not sure which slide you're on because I can't see, but.
Are you on 10?
I'm on 10. Which one?
You're on the middle school SPP achievement comparison chart?
Yes.
Okay, so where it says indicators of closing the achievement gap for all students, am I reading that right where it says 0% of the gap has been closed? Is that right?
It's a different slide, but I'll explain what that means. I'm still on this slides just showing where we fell.
Oh, where we're just listed as number 8? Is that the slide you're on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's
I'm giving
so
you a lot
hard
of
to tell
information when I do that.
Where you are here.
I understand. That is the reason why that chart is there, so I can explain that.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were on that slide.
I have
Not
a
a
question. You mentioned that one of the reasons you thought that the score wasn't as high, or whatever the score is what it is in the middle school, is because some of the students are taking Algebra 1, and then they're being tested, they have to take the PSSA exam, which is not the same. But doesn't every middle school have that same issue?
Yes, that's why across the state, the middle school scores look like that. Yes.
But in 7th grade, it's a percentage of the kids, maybe like 30%, or what percentage are in Algebra 1?
We don't have as many. It may be 30.
Or 20
It dropped from last year because of our different matrix.
Right. But then in 8th grade, the ones who took Algebra 1 in 7th grade are now in geometry, so they're taking a different class than the PSSA, right? And then and then the majority of the students then are in Algebra 1. So what does it get up to? Like 70 to 80% of them are taking.
Eventually, that's what we're looking at, and the solution that the state has is, well, maybe what we'll look at is you'll only have to take a keystone exam for algebra at the middle level, and you won't have to take the PSSA, but then when you go to the high school, we're going to create another test, and you'll have to take another test. And then they said, and then just wait until we let you know what's going to happen next. So they don't know, but they're not willing to let go of one.
Mm-hmm. But what's New Hope Silbury doing that they have a 91 in middle school?
Yep, New Hope Silbury, well, they're a smaller population than we are, and they have a less percentage of special ed, but I'm not making any excuses here. They're doing a lot of data analysis, they're strategic, they're fully aligned, and they have been. So we are moving closer to fully aligned standards-based instruction. We are combining the right elements for improvement. We just aren't there completely yet, but our intention, our expectation is these improve every year. They should. If you put the right elements together, that's what it should take.
Another thing that I noticed, and maybe you know of others that joined since then, but as far as who uses Linkit, we use Linkit, Bristol uses Linkit, and we're lower. I would have thought with the data analysis that we're using that, I guess what system are the other schools using in comparison to what we're using? Because it seems like the Linkit ones are lower on the chart. Do you know what I mean?
Let me just try to explain from my perspective. it is not the data warehouse that you choose. It's the data you use and how you understand the data. You could be using any system. It doesn't have to be Linkit. What we had with Linkit was, for the first time, teachers were able to see more than one data point. Well, I can pull up my kids' PSSA, I can know what they did last year, I know what they're doing on these benchmarks, and I know what they're doing for classroom assessments. So it provides rich data. It could be Linkit, but it could be a different warehouse. So it isn't, oh, if you use Linkit, your scores aren't high. Actually, I think by virtue of the elementary schools using Linkit over the past 2 years, that they are good and strong and moving in the right direction. But I'm not crediting Linkit. It's a data warehouse. You really have to credit any movement on the development of understanding of what the data means. So, what Linkit does for us, which other districts don't have and want, is it breaks it down for you, breaks it down for teachers for what the skills and standards are. Not only that, it'll break it down and tell you which groupings are in your classroom, so it's more efficient that way. So the system itself is efficient, but the actual system doesn't improve test scores. It's teachers working together.
Well, so does this, I'm feeling like this is kind of demonstrating that our data meetings maybe aren't necessarily the best path. Is that your takeaway too, or not really?
No, absolutely not. What I am saying is when you run data meetings, as the ones I have been involved with, particularly at the elementary schools, you are on the right track. Our elementary schools are doing very well. They are data-driven. I mean, they are. Is it the only thing they do? Absolutely not. We have wonderful elementary schools. So no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying we should be data-driven.
I want to go back to you said that the Algebra 1 rewrite is coming? For the,
Mr. O'Boyle's going to be presenting a proposal for our algebra, or curriculum update for Algebra 1.
I thought that we had already made some changes this year. We didn't?
We made changes regarding who's taking Algebra 1 at the middle level.
Okay, but he didn't make any adjustment to the course yet.
He didn't make the adjustment to the course, he made an adjustment to we made an adjustment to who takes the course and when.
Okay.
Now it'll be the adjustment to the actual course. So he did it over, hopefully over 2 years.
Okay.
Okay. So you want to get to the actual, see, this configuration can be confusing. And that's why I thought, well, let me go through it. If I could actually see, it would be better. So when you look at an academic performance profile, this is the high school. You see in the left-hand corner a green block, 74.9. And that green means that we are meeting state expectations for performance. So I want to give you the list of colors. You can see them at the top, but what you want to have is dark blue, because that's saying there's significant evidence that we're exceeding the state standards. And then there's moderate evidence, if you're in light blue, that you're exceeding the standards. Green means you are meeting the standards. And then there's moderate evidence that you're not meeting the standards in yellow, and then there's significant evidence if you're in red. So that's what the color coding is all about there. So how do they come up with that score? So I can't see. I need to be looking. All right, I'll do my best. All right, so you look at the indicators of academic achievement. And that's really basically for the high school, you are looking at student achievement, how many students are proficient or advanced on the keystone. So on the lit, the bio, and the English. And if you see the green is saying that we're still meeting the standard for, I just can't see. We're still meeting the standard. Oh, Diane, thank you. Oh, that's too much.
Too big.
Too big. Okay, very good. So we're still meeting the standard of proficiency for math. And ELA, we're in light blue. Science, we're in light blue. And our students who go to the tech school and they take the NOCTI, they're in light blue. So these are good. This is what you want to see. And then when you, well, grade 3 won't matter in high school. SAT and ACT, we get the full 100 in terms of percent, so we're dark blue. So as many points as you can get for that, we got for that. So the top part indicates the percentage of students who are proficient or advanced on those particular exams. Yes?
So I was curious when I saw that, why did we get the 100 score for the, is there a number, a percentage of kids that have to take it?
Yes, it has to reach 40, and we were like 67.
Okay.
So we were high. We were higher, no, we were at 100%, yes. So we reached, that's, yeah. So our SAT and ACT scores reached the benchmark for significant evidence of exceeding the standard. So this part, when you look at this, you'd say, and I'll tell you, I looked at Quakertown and Souderton and, you know, school districts that are similar to us. And in terms of this first part of the SPP, we are all similar. You know, there may be some fluctuation in those numbers, but in terms of achievement, that's where we all are pretty much performing at the same rate.
It's, whoop. Oh my goodness. Yeah, could you do this for me so I can, I already saw, so indicators of
Closing the achievement gap. Okay, so the next section, indicators of closing the achievement gap for all students. I think Mrs. Bascom, this is what you were referring to. So this is tricky because this is saying of all of the students in your population, how close are you coming for closing the achievement gap of non-proficient students, right? So you see that for each of the Keystone exams. So if you look at the science, you see we get full credit for that. I just want to explain something to you. What this actually means is the test scores that they use for this indicator is the initial baseline. So you'll see across the whole county and the state that the science and the bio are higher than the other two. And there's a reason for that, because the baseline score in science is much lower than the baseline score of the other two. So for us, it was like in the 50s as our baseline. And even for next year, I think for us to exceed the standards, it would only be in the 60%, and we're already at 80%. So we started here, and we were going up. Whereas in ELA and math, we started higher. So in particular, ELA, I think our baseline year was somewhere in like mid-80s. And it's harder to close the achievement gap. Not that we shouldn't, not that we're not trying to, but I just want you to understand that is why you see science. Not that we're not doing all good things in science, but we started a lot lower. So did we achieve any growth there? We did, but we didn't meet the growth that they wanted us to. So in other words, if it was 6% and we only moved students 2%, we're not getting credit for that. Because you have to meet there's a 6-year cycle of this, and we're in year 4, and if you don't meet that, that's what you see up there. Does that make sense to you? Kind of? Kind of. So that's what closing the achievement gap for all students. So that's an aggregate of everybody who took the Keystone, no matter who you are. The next one is closing the achievement gap for historically underperforming students. So, can you do that for me? Thanks. So what that means is in the categories of special education, economically disadvantaged, and English as a second language. Now I'm going to take that group out, and I'm going to see how you're doing with that group. Okay. So even you see red, they're saying you're not getting there. We moved, but we didn't move enough. They give you the number that they want you to move to, and if you don't move it, you don't get the credit for it. And when I looked at other school districts who achievement-wise were just like we were, The reason why their scores are higher is because of these. Not only because of that closing of the achievement gap, but the next section is worth 40% of this SPP, and that's the PVOS growth. And that is measuring something different than the other two. So the other two are measuring how many more students did you get to proficiency, right? So that moment in time test. PVOS doesn't measure that. So what PVOS does is it takes all, I'm a high school student, it takes all my testing data, right? And yours and yours and yours and yours, and we're all in a classroom. We're in a bio classroom. Collectively, we are light blue. Collectively, we are doing very well. What they want then is for that particular year to make at least 1 year's growth. So it's a growth score. So the idea is, if I came in at green, at least keep me there. If I came in at light blue, at least keep me there. Because that indicates that you kept me at my performance level. Now, if I got to dark blue, you even moved me further than that. That's what the difference is. That's going down kind of a stretch of below basic, proficient, and advanced. Where the other ones were just saying how many of you are there. This one's saying, how much did you grow me? That's what PVOS scores are. That is where our biggest issue is.
I need the PVOS one right straight down.
So when we looked at our scores, we're like, wow, our achievement scores are right in there, but our growth scores are not. Now, in some of the elementary schools where you saw the SPPs there, their growth scores were higher. So when I looked at, for example, Quakertown, and I looked at their PVOS scores are higher. So, again, science, yes, we're meeting that. Actually, we exceed that standard. We are moving some students, but we're not moving them the number and at the rate that they were expected to move. That's a problem. It is a problem. We need to be working on those students. How do you work on that? You need to know who they are, right? Who are the students who fall into this category? And then again, this is what the whole data analysis is. What skills, what standards have they not at least met? And then what are we going to do about that? And that's not a simple answer. These are complicated answers. They are necessary supports and decisions that have to be made at the high school. And at the middle school and at the elementary school, but the high school is what we're talking about right now. So one of the things that we have not done in the past at the high school is use benchmarks. So for the first time, we're using CDTs. And CDTs are classroom diagnostic tools that the state develops. It's an online test, it's free. Schools who do really well on PVOS use CDTs, at least some of them. All right, so we are now instituting that CDT for these classes, these tested classes. That's the only thing CDTs are for. So what that tells you is, and it's very similar to the design, and I'm sure they use old, past questions on that. So I take that CDT. Now I have all those scores that are in Linkit. The teachers can, separate out who did well, who didn't do well, who needs help in specific skill area. That is so important. Because a one size, or just teaching in a group is not closing the achievement gap. Are we still have a lot of students who are proficient in advanced? Yes, you can see that. But what the state is saying, we'll move some more. Move students closer to it. And that is what we have to do. So we're starting with using the assessment to give us the best information on how to differentiate which groups should be having this type of practice. For example, for the Algebra Keystone exam, Mr. O'Boyle has been able to pull that data out to take a certain percentage of these students to say, hey, they are very close to proficiency. What can we give them additionally that will help them? So they're going to offer after-school help, teachers are going to help them, they're going to assign specific study island lessons to support them, they're going to, in some cases, take one day out of the cycle, maybe for 20 minutes at the end, to review some of the skill deficits with some of these kids who may be 4 or 5 in a group, but we have to do all those things if we expect to meet these PFAS expectations. So that's really what's going on. It isn't that we don't have, honestly, you look at the data over the years, those numbers look pretty much the same at the high school because PSSAs have changed, so you can't measure those years, you have to go these past 2 years. But for ELA, we're always in about the same percent, the math has always been about the same percent. It's time to say, well, how do we move everybody? But what holds us back in that 70 range when we should be higher is those PFAS scores. So, you know, over the past, I don't know, what is it now? Is this our 4th year? You know, the high school went from like a 92 to an 80 something, a 70 something, and now another 70. And if you look at it, the achievement scores do not change. We get less and less with the PFAS growth and the closing of the achievement gap. The other place where I saw where we were different, where we lost points, was the number of advanced students.
Can we ask some questions about the PFAS before we move
Oh,
on
sure.
to
Yeah.
the? So one question I have is, how do they use, I mean, if you're from 3rd through 8th grade, they take the PSSAs every year. So you can say how much growth they predict, how much growth they were supposed to make, and did they make that a year's growth in a year time, right? And that's the PFAS score. So how do they do it in the high school? If the keystones, they take one keystone, so what are they comparing it to?
It's all their data. It's all the state data that they have taken. It's a combination of all that. And only in science are they making a prediction, right? Because that's 4th and then 8th. But every year data, right? They have all that data to have an expected score, an expected growth measure. So it isn't just, okay, this is my first keystone and I don't have any data. They use all of it. They use all the data that a student has taken a state test.
Okay, so if the student takes they take the literature keystone in 10th grade, so they didn't take a test in 9th grade, so they're using their PSSA scores
Correct.
from middle school, and they're making a prediction on what that student should get. And so the PVAS isn't just saying, you know, that you're hitting a certain score. I mean, it's saying that it's not just the kids who are struggling, it's the gifted
Everybody.
kids as well, saying the gifted kids didn't grow a year
That's
or
right.
grow 2 years in the 2 years that they had between the 8th grade and that. So, I mean, I don't know that extra help after school, I mean, those kids don't need necessarily extra help. I mean, they needed whatever they're doing in their classes. And I mean, this is where, I mean, I compared it, Pennridge to other schools that I know well, and it really is the PVAS, and then it's the extra points down lower is where we differ the most. So just saying, well, we're gonna give extra help after school, I don't think that's the answer. I think it's what they're doing in class.
It is, and I absolutely agree with you. First, you have to make sure that you have everything in place in the class, but you also have to differentiate in the class. So you do have to do things somewhat differently in the class. And if I have gifted kids in the class, I mean, I met with elementary principals today, Joe Galeza and Stephanie Washerman. We talked about the gifted students. And actually, when we analyzed the data for gifted students, it wasn't our gifted students necessarily who didn't maintain advanced. It was the non-gifted students who were advanced who went to proficient. So it seems like we were meeting the needs of our gifted students, but we did not meet the needs of our formally advanced non-gifted students who went to proficient. That's what we saw here. So what we have to do is, and it's not just after school help, but I think, we're gonna do everything we can. It's also providing more rigorous opportunities of practice, in particular in math, for our higher achieving students. So, and some of you are teachers or were teachers. That takes some professional learning from classroom teachers and special ed teachers, and who's going to work together and how will we do that. So no, I don't think it's just after-school tutoring. I do think it's what you're doing in the classroom and the supports that you are providing students, but the opportunities for more rigorous practice is what we're seeing that we actually need. So, you know, I will go over certain slides and say generally what we're doing, but I want you to know that each school has a plan of action. And what I'm seeing for the first time since I've been here is a collaboration between special ed and general ed. Because we didn't really have that collaboration, and we weren't really talking about curriculum. And I am an absolute firm believer that students who are in our learning support program should have every opportunity to have access to that general ed curriculum. You can never expect students to not be taught in the curriculum and then go take a test and do well in it. So in years past, there was a modified PSSA. Well, they don't offer a modified PSSA anymore. So instead of using Saxon math in the elementary schools for these students, you know, we're providing them with opportunities to participate in the general ed curriculum. So there are the other things. I mean, these are philosophical issues, and we've been talking about them, but I think you have to face the facts. You know, if you aren't performing where you need to perform, you face the facts and you say, where were we, where do we need to be, where should we be, and what are those plans to get us there? So they're not singular, they're complex.
So I'm wondering too, because 2 years ago, I mean, last year the score was similar, around 75. But
Yeah,
then
about
the year
the same.
before it was in the 80s, and the year before it was 90. So what happened? So was it the PBOS scores?
If you look under it, you will see the achievement scores do not fluctuate much at all. It's every year we have less, we're meeting that. Can you get that? We're meeting those expectations. We're not meeting those expectations. I mean, it's very clear.
So it seems like our biggest weakness is differentiating the instruction for those students so that we're meeting their individual needs. What is the plan to do that? Where are we building in that time and the resources for teachers to be able to differentiate their instruction at all levels?
So it's not an easy answer, but I'm going to begin with, so we have 2 schools at the elementary level who are piloting MTSS, so the multi-tiered systems of support, and we're going to be sharing more information on that. And that is to say, what do we do for Tier 1? That means what do we do for everybody? What do we do for Tier 2 for the students who need more reinforcement? And what do we do for Tier 3 who need a lot more supplementary instruction? Now that takes the whole school working together to figure that out. And you may see it happening in one school differently than you see another one. You have title schools that have 2 reading specialists, so the supports are different. Now their needs are higher. So that may look different, but you may go to a Bedminster or a Deibler, and they're not Title I schools, and they only have 1 reading specialist. They have an IST teacher. They have specialist teachers with some time to support, you know, and help students. So that's when I talk about data meetings. That's the whole school coming together to say, this is who we are, this is where our students are, right? What kind of supports can we give them? So we have IST teachers who can help do some push-in with math. That's great. We have number worlds now. Let's do that. I do think we're going to see a market difference, especially with our special ed students, which will clearly help the PBOS scores, but more importantly, help the students. You could have your reading specialist being pull out some students, or you'll see other reading specialists. I know at Sellersville, the reading specialist has gone into every classroom, modeling guided reading, modeling these strategies to help students. We have other elementary schools who use like coach books, like resources, but they don't teach to it. They've incorporated those practices within the lessons during the day. So as a former principal, I can tell you this because I did it. You know, you work with your group of teachers and you be strategic about it and you monitor the progress of all students. And that's how it works. So in the middle level, it's going to look different, and in the high school level, it is different. So differentiation comes pretty naturally to elementary teachers. It's pretty much what we've always done. yes, teachers need more professional development on what differentiation could look like. They need to know what it can, and maybe I'm teaching with another teacher, maybe somebody's coming into my classroom, so things that we typically weren't doing, we're going to have to do. And that will, and I will tell you, I think that I have seen the proverbial light bulb go on. It's like, yes, we do. We need to be looking at this data, and we need to be doing some things differently.
I guess the data meetings are outside of school though, you know what I mean? That's sitting and talking about the data. That's not actually using the data to fix, that's not using the data in the classrooms, you know what, and I get that you need to go over the data, but after, it's pretty much pulled out. You can pull up any kid's name, the data's right there, it tells you exactly what it is. So I don't think the meetings are really what we're missing. And the teachers, as far as differentiating it, if you're differentiating instruction, we need those other people that we're pulling in to split up those groups, to do those guided reading groups.
Mm-hmm.
The literacy initiative that you have piloted at West Rock Hill, I think that's going to be huge.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, that's something that we have to duplicate across the
Mhm.
other subject areas and district-wide, because we don't have, I think, we need to make sure that our teachers have the time and the resources to differentiate the instruction, not just the data. Do you know what I mean?
I do, but I'm not talking about after-school data meetings. I'm talking about meetings principals and IST teachers have during the day. I'm not talking about this after-school
Yeah,
meeting.
but I guess I mean the meetings aren't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual differentiation, like the
Mhm.
time. I'm talking about in the classroom. I'm not talking about the meetings talking about it. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and that is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, you're right. I mean, a classroom teacher who runs the gamut, or students are, super high all the way to low, I need some supports, I need some resources, and then you have to do that. I mean, we don't have endless resources. You have to use the resources that you have. And that's why we ask for certain, for iPads, for example, because, there's certain programs that these students can do that. Once you teach them how to use, for example, eSpark, which you have at West Rock Hill, how do you use that? Well, now I can take a guided reading group, and you can go over, and you can use that, and you can spend the next 15 minutes on that particular skill. So there's multiple ways to do it. You don't necessarily need another teacher. In some cases, that is what we do. I'll tell you, the math aids that we have through Title I, been phenomenal. So, in Title I schools, they're funded through Title I funding, federal funding, and they've been a wonderful support. And you know why? Well, they're dedicated, but we've trained them. This is what you have to do to help our students. So we're seeing progress there.
So how can we fill in that gap with the schools that aren't Title I schools? I mean, I guess what I'm saying, I want to see us directing the resources to those areas. And we had a lot of program improvement proposals tonight, and we have a lot of bells and whistles. But before the bells and whistles, I want to work on, I want to direct it to these things, to these resources that our teachers need for the differentiation. You know what I mean?
I do, and I think that we have a lot of resources at the elementary level. I think what we didn't have was a totally aligned ELA curriculum and framework for teaching it. We didn't have a writing program. I think that they're the things that we are investing in. So when we talk about program improvements, they're going to look a lot different from the high school. I actually thought the ones tonight presented will offer a lot of things for our high school students, and I wouldn't want to not do that. But I'm not saying sacrifice that. So we've been very careful. Dr. Yarnell and I have been looking at this, like, what should we bring forward? And I didn't want to see another big dollar amount program improvement that was not going to address those basic needs at the elementary level. The next one you see is going to be about word skills and writing. Now when we have that, and we have our literacy leadership team working on the curriculum and instruction and differentiation, yeah, I'm going to be finally very happy to see that that's in place. So it's not like sacrifice one for the other. Although you can't have everything. Everybody wants everything, but we can't have it.
So what you're saying is the things that we were, you divided out, the high school and the middle school from, and elementary school from tonight, so we're going to talk about that later, and that's where we're gonna hit these building blocks, the basics that we've been talking about.
Yes, at the next, excuse me, at the next curriculum meeting, that's what the proposals are. It's for writing and word attack, word study, really, for vocabulary development.
Well, it's interesting when you're talking about how do we improve vocabulary. I mean, I was thinking back, how did my vocabulary grow? And maybe if we did do some more of the basic things that, you know, probably everybody in this auditorium did when we were in elementary school, we would have better vocabulary, better spelling. And sometimes the basics get knocked for being too old school, but there was a reason why we did those things. And if it could include that, I think it would be good. And isn't, when I'm hearing this differentiation, to me it sounds like when I was in elementary school, we had the different reading groups. Well, I was in color, you know, then there was the amigos.
Right.
Why? So is that what we're kind of going back to? Like you can differentiate to a point, but it doesn't mean that there's going to be 29 different things necessarily. You can have, I know tracking's a bad word, but you know, you could have different groups in the classrooms. Can't we do that?
That's exactly what we're doing. So what we're doing is, there's a Fountas and Pinnell, the teachers, you'll hear them say, I have to F&P. It's Fountas, but that's what it's called. Everybody's learning how to F&P because that is Fountas and Pinnell. So that's going to tell them where students are in terms of levels. So to your point, I'm a classroom teacher and I have 6 L's, 7 M's, and 2 N's. These are where these students are for their instructional level of reading. So now I can take my M's and move them up. I'm going to take different reading groups. That's what we're talking about. Whereas over these past, I don't remember when, I wasn't here when Reading Street was adopted. So over a long period of time, it's been whole group instruction at the elementary level. That's what it is. That is what it is. What we're trying to do is meet those expectations by providing small group instruction, guided reading groups based on my level, yours and yours, but maybe yours are not the same.
Good. I think that's a good idea.
Can we, I mean, we were talking about the high school. I'm not sure how we ended up on the elementary school, but we were talking about the SBP score for the high school, and the elementary school we said is 80 and is second in the county, so
Well, I do have a question about how the scores, because I understand the point about if you're already here, it's harder to go from here to here.
Yes.
Does each school, maybe this is a stupid question, but, so when the state gives you your, Pennridge gives you your recommendation, is every school given the same percentage growth number? Is that uniform? So
Oh, yeah.
like they say, okay, that's what I want to
It's all based on the same, but I'll give you the example of what I mean for the high school. So for science, the proficient and or advanced achieved in the baseline year was 28.68. The proficient and or advanced reported this year was 65.88. For us to get into blue again, we only need 58.4 next year. We're already over there because the starting point was very low. But the baseline for ELA was 86.27. We were at this year 83.54. Doesn't seem like it's that far off, but according to them, we're negative 2.73. And for us to meet that next year, we need to be at 91.99 because they just already established this number. And that's where you're going to be because we started at 86. And then for, I think I do. And then for algebra, we started at 74.6. We were at 72.56 this year. Well, we didn't need it. And for next year, which is what I was telling you about Michael Boyle and pulling out the kind of bubble students like who are almost there, we need 85.19 next year based on their calculations. So it's where you started from. And then, yes, in terms of percentage-wise, they're all, yes, I mean, they establish where you need to be. It's 6 years, you're in year 4, you were supposed to be at 74, and you're only at 72. So you don't get all the points.
But what I'm asking is, so Pennridge, they, whatever this percentage is, Pennridge, you have to get 5% higher. Does Council Rock also have to get 5%, or do they?
It's, okay, so let's say the end result is 100, depending on where all of you are,
Okay.
what will it take for you to get to 100? We're not all the same, but the end result's going to be the same. So no, they're not all the same, because we are all over the place. But if they're let's say for ELA they were at 50, they could have started at 50. They could be in dark blue at 62, while we're in yellow, and we're only 2 points below where it is. So it's not all equal.
This is the PIVA score you're talking about?
We're
Or
the
closing
achievement gap scores,
Closing the
closing the
gap.
achievement gap.
Okay.
So that's where, the reality is, that's where we need to be next year to close the achievement gap. We are digging deep in the data and what we're doing, and I emphasize data because it's important. Is it everything? No, it isn't, but you can't walk into this blind and just not know where students are. That's why I keep emphasizing that. But that gives you an idea of where we need to go. And then we have the extra credit. Our scores are lower than local districts. We need to get more students maintaining or achieving at advanced levels, and that's rigorous instruction, and that's differentiated instruction. And then when we have our 3% or higher for our AP exams, we were thrilled with the scores we have this year. We have more students taking exams, more students achieving the 3 or higher. This is the senior-only subgroup of that. And that's not as high as it was last year. So that's another area that we need to work on, but we were very thrilled. Our scores were really they were good. You'll see that on the slides. But that's another place we can earn points, in the advanced and in the AP.
I have a question about that, the AP. So it says % 3 or higher on an advanced placement exam. It's not of just the students who took it, it's of all of the seniors, is that correct?
It's of all the seniors who took the exams.
No, not of all the seniors who took the exam, it's of all the seniors.
It's divided by all the seniors.
Correct,
Yes.
so kids who don't take it are factored in. That's
That's
why if you look
right.
at this people who took the exams, it's something like 80-some%.
Tied.
You're saying. Right, but we only have 53. And that goes into giving our kids incentives. And that's what, I have a question because I talked to Dr. Rattigan about that last year, about giving the AP students more of an incentive to take the AP exam. As of right now, kids they have to have A's in all, the way it was last year, they had to have A's in every single class, every marking period and their midterm, and take the AP exam in order not to take the final. Which is crazy because they're taking this huge AP exam. Whereas other schools, Southerton, you only have to have a C average because they're encouraging their students to take the AP exam. And I believe the supervisors talked about it, and the only change that was made was that you have to have an A average.
It's an average, yes.
So, and I still think we're not giving our students any incentive. And if my student is taking 4 AP exams in May, and then because they had 1 B, which maybe was an 89 or an 88, then they have to take the final and the AP exam, that's just too much work. And then you're getting into this where we're not, it's for an individual student, it's too many tests in 1 2-week time period. And then you can see it also impacts our scores because we're not encouraging more students to take the AP test.
So in the district where you work, they have to get a C, is that what you said?
Yes.
Just a C average in their AP course?
C average in the AP class, which is a 73%, I believe, because they have pluses and minuses, and take the AP test, and then they do not have to take the final.
And that's the incentive
Yes,
that they
and I
see
discussed
working?
that with Dr. Rattigan and Ms. DeBona in the spring, and the supervisors discussed it, and the only change that was made was saying it was an A average instead of saying, and I believe the change was made across the board for all classes, am I correct?
Yes, it's across the board.
Right, and that's not what my goal, or the point was, is that students taking an AP exam, if they're doing well enough in the class, they shouldn't be required to take the final as well. It's just too much testing for our kids. Kids' anxiety and stress levels are so high. Why are we making those students who are take the final and the AP test? And my point is that it's also impacting our SPP score. and impacting our individual students.
Right, so I want to agree with that it's been something that we've talked about before. For the students who take the AP, they start working in July of the summer before school, and then they work through and they take that AP exam in May.